Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome back, my Be Health Empowered family, to another episode of Excuse Me, Doctor. My name is Dr. Melissa Clark. Please call me Dr. Mel. I am delighted to be here again with you this week to create an amazing week with all the health news that you need and all the information that you require to make wise health decisions, not just for yourself, but also for your family and your community. So, if this is your first time joining us, I hope that you will go ahead and hit that like button if you're checking us out on Facebook, and that subscribe button if you are checking us out on YouTube. We really appreciate you for that. And if this is not your first time, you know that I absolutely require my amazing co-host to join me so that we can make this show amazing. So, Wayne Bruce, Lila Mays, where you at?
Hey
What
there.
up?
Happy Monday, everybody.
Happy
Hey,
Monday.
happy Monday. We
Yeah,
kicking off the
I'm
week.
in that mode.
I hope everybody had a great weekend.
I had a great weekend.
That's
Yeah,
good, man. I had a pretty cool weekend. Pretty
me three.
cool.
Me three.
Hmm.
So yeah. So what's going on tonight?
What
What
we
we got
got
going
cooking?
on
What
tonight?
we got cooking?
So, look, tonight we're diving into a conversation that's not just timely, but honestly life saving. We're going to be talking about vaccines, what they are, how they work, and why there's so much confusion around them right now.
Yo, yeah, we're especially going with the measles popping back up in communities across the country. Like, didn't we already solve the measles problem?
Right.
We did, and it's back because and we solved it with a whole lot of other problems too, like polio and smallpox, even chickenpox. I mean, and chickenpox is new because I had it when I was a kid, and now they have a vaccine for it, and kids don't get chickenpox anymore.
S-
So
Wow.
yeah, we had solved it.
Yeah, well,
Well,
in my neighborhood, they called it the chicken pops. I'm just saying,
the
Right,
pops,
mine too.
the pops of chicken.
pops, chicken
Right.
pops.
Well, listen, part of the problem is there's so much online noise and nonsense, the bots and people who aren't experts who just love pushing out misinformation and creating confusion around vaccines.
Yeah, that's why it's important today. Today's show really matters. We're cutting through all the myths, we're busting everything up, and we have a powerhouse medical expert joining us again today. She's a friend of the show. I mean, Dr. Sandra Elizabeth Ford. I said the whole government name. And she's she's gonna break down to us just how we, break down to parents what's the best choices for their children and us in society.
Right. And whether you're a parent or if you're just, an adult thinking about your next vaccine or just trying to make, sense out of the nonsense that's circulating, it seems, from the highest authorities in the land, from a government perspective also,
Yeah.
you're in the right place because we are going to hit it all.
We're gonna
Let's
get
do it. But
Yeah.
okay.
first, we have to get into the weekly recap.
The weekly recap. We forgot to get the people
There
want to
we
hear
go.
the
There we
people.
go. It needs some theme music. We say that every week. So we got to get that intern working on that theme music for the
With
weekly
that
recap.
That
intern,
intern, that
That
intern has been
intern,
stressing me out.
I tell you. All right. Well, toddlers and tech. Too soon. So Dr. Mill, we often see toddlers with their parents' tablets or smartphones, totally entertained for hours. But it's something I often wonder about, like how young is too young for that much screen time? For any
you know,
screen
that's a
time, really.
that's a great question because there was a recent study that came out that showed that babies under 2 years old are spending more than an hour a day looking at screens, and by the time they're 8, they're spending over 2.5 hours a day on a screen. And this
Wow.
is really in a period of time where the brain is growing rapidly. Something like a million new connections are being made in your brain every second when you're that age, and so the brain really needs real world things like touch and smell and FaceTime, not you know, not FaceTime on a screen, but face-to-face
Right.
interactions with real people, which is really how healthy brain development works.
And it seems like too much screen time might make real life boring. Things that we found entertaining, like playing with toys or chatting with friends, just don't compete with these flashy videos.
Exactly. They're seeing that children ages 5 to 12 might actually become desensitized to real
Mm,
world, interactions with real people due to that constant screen stimulation. And it's oftentimes not even what they're seeing on the screen, it's about what they're missing out on in life, the creative play, the conversations, the
right.
chance to learn independently and problem solve. All those things are being, you know, left behind if you're constantly in front of a screen.
So, what can parents do?
Well, I think the key is really balance, really making sure that there's a minimum of screen time, less
Mhm.
than an hour a day,
Mhm.
and making sure that it doesn't replace those real life things and experiences that are so critical for brain development. So play, talk, um, and exploration of the world. So make sure that they are part of the experiences, and if they're on the screen, make sure that you're monitoring it and you're part of the experience if possible.
Yeah, I saw a post the other day where this young lady said she was so excited because she could hear the children in her building dropping their bikes, and somebody was like counting for hide and go seek. She's like, "Oh, the rest of
Wow.
these aren't
Yep,
lost." There are
yep,
children who actually know how to play hide and go seek, and they were
right,
actually doing
That's cool.
and ride a bike.
right and
Exactly.
ride a bike.
Yep,
Yeah.
That's
that's
very cool.
great.
So speaking of riding a bike, Dr. Mill,
Mhm.
I'm on this health journey and weight loss journey, and the treadmill has been a loyal partner to me. And what's going on with treadmills and tumors?
Well, don't believe the hype of that. It's not saying that treadmills cause tumors. They don't. It's actually the opposite. It's about how exercise on a treadmill or otherwise has been shown in a recent study to impact the recurrence of colon cancer. So
Oh
they looked at
wow.
Mm.
around 900 individuals who had finished surgery and chemotherapy for colon cancer. We all remember that, for example, that's what Chadwick Boseman died of.
Mhm.
So we know that colon cancer is occurring at younger ages. It disproportionately affects communities of color. So this is really important to note that they compared half the people who just got general health advice and the other who had a supervised exercise program for 3 years. They show that those in the supervised exercise program had a 28% lower risk of the cancer coming back and a 37%, almost 40% lower risk of death in the next 8 years compared to the people that just got the general advice.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
That's
impressive.
important. So this wasn't like strenuous, like running or jumping or anything, right?
No, just walking, for example, like brisk walking about an hour a day, 3 to 4 times a week. And it's such a simple lifestyle change that can have a major impact
Mhm.
that there are some experts who are now advocating for exercise to be considered part of the standard regimen of colon cancer treatment, after
Mhm.
the treatment
Oh,
is done. So, as always, consult with your healthcare provider before you start any new exercise program, but I think this is really promising.
I'm
yeah.
excited.
That's
Yeah.
a let's walk a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Last but not least, travel warning. So, a lot of people are looking forward to getting away for vacation this summer, but the CDC just issued a new travel warning that people should know about. What is it?
Yes. Measles. Measles cases are on the rise, and the CDC is urging travelers to ensure that they're vaccinated before heading overseas. And we
Mhm.
know measles is super contagious. Up to 90% of unvaccinated people who are exposed to the virus become infected.
Wow. I saw recently 3 cases were linked to a Turkish Airlines flight that landed in Denver mid May. And one of the infected individuals was a young child who is now hospitalized.
Wow.
Yes, that was very unfortunate. And the CDC is reporting that as of this week, which is the end of May,
Mhm.
1st of June, there have been over 1,000 cases this year. And the
Crazy.
cases rising are attributed to declining vaccination rates and increased international travel. So it's important to remember that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine (MMR) is 97% effective after 2 doses, and it's the best defense against the measles.
Wow.
It's wild that we are having a measles conversation, but here we are. So basically, if you're planning to travel, make sure your vaccinations are up to date. It's a simple step that can protect you and those around you.
Absolutely. And if you have symptoms like fever, cough, and rash after traveling, make sure you immediately contact your healthcare provider.
So
Hmm.
don't believe everything you hear.
Oh, that was pretty spot on.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
You must have been practicing.
That was pretty spot on.
Now we have my favorite.
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
All right. So BB Bama says she saw on TikTok that raw milk is healthier and more natural than pasteurized milk because pasteurizing kills all the stuff in milk that makes the body good.
Right.
I don't know about that. Excuse me, Dr. Mel. Is that true?
I'm going to be crystal clear on this one. Raw milk is not safer or healthier than pasteurized milk. In fact, it's one of the riskiest foods that you can drink, especially for children, elderly, and pregnant women. So, pasteurization just means heating the milk, y'all. That's all it is. And it's designed to kill harmful bacteria. It doesn't destroy the important nutrients. So, the nutrients in milk are calcium, protein, and vitamin D. They're all still there. Plus, those bacteria I was talking about killing, they're things like E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, Campylobacter. You might have heard those names associated with really serious illness. Things like very bad diarrhea to the point of dehydration, kidney failure, and in some cases, even death. And we see outbreaks happen every year. They're completely preventable. Plus, just a few drops of contaminated raw milk can sometimes make you incredibly sick. So it's a gamble you don't want to take. Natural is beautiful, but natural ain't always good. And pasteurization was developed for a reason, to make milk safe. So don't, don't. Just go with the pasteurized milk. Don't seek out the raw milk. Be safe.
Mhm.
All right.
So, and there you have it, Dr. Mel.
All right.
Once again.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all. Y'all walked us through that recap and debunk, and we're going to see you back in a little bit because we're going to jump into a continuation of that conversation that we just had about the measles vaccine. And we're going to talk about vaccines in general. I didn't really think that, after COVID and everything that we talked about on this show, since we've been doing it for the past 5 years, through the height, ever since the beginning and through the height of the COVID epidemic, we talked about vaccines, and we really need to revisit this topic. But we're seeing things happen like the measles epidemic. We're seeing vaccination rates in children go down. And so we thought that it was a really good time to revisit this topic and to really break it down for us. We have an incredible expert. Her name is Dr. Sandra Elizabeth Ford. She's a board certified pediatrician. She is a public health shero for real. She's been special assistant to the President of the United States, President Biden, for public health and science. She's also spent 16 years leading public health in both Atlanta's DeKalb County, as well as for a time at Fulton County, doing double duty during the pandemic. This is the woman, y'all. So she is going to break it down for us. Welcome, Dr. Ford. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Super happy to be here tonight.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in and start with the basics. So can you walk us through, how do vaccines actually work to protect us? What's going on? What are they doing?
So the simplest way to describe it is a vaccine trains your immune system. So a vaccination is either a live virus that has been attenuated, which means it has been weakened, or it's a killed virus. So they put the virus into your system. That virus creates antibodies. Those antibodies also grow memory cells so that your brain remembers, your body remembers. And so the next time that you are exposed to that virus, your body will remember and create an immune response. So it's a trainer. So it's sort of a reminder that you've been exposed to this, and it protects you the next time you see it.
Right. Thank you. That makes it so simple. And I always like to highlight that Onesimus, an enslaved African, was the one who brought the concept of inoculation to this country back in the 1700s, which is what vaccinations are based on today. So, and they had that science down from back then, and it's just morphed into what we do today. And so we're seeing a lot of concern among parents about vaccine safety. What systems are in place so that to reassure the public and to make sure that we're all safe when taking vaccines?
So all vaccines are monitored. There are two ways that we assess vaccine safety. The vaccine adverse event reporting system, VAERS, VAERS, is a self-reported system. It's run by both FDA and CDC concurrently, and so anyone can call in. You can look up the number on the CDC or online if you have any kind of adverse reaction. So you could get a measles shot and get a toothache, and you put that down and say, I had a measles shot and I had a toothache. So that one, theirs is much more broad. It's open to the public. So there's a risk for under and over reporting, because just because you have there's causality and then there's just timing. So it might be just that something happened negatively that has nothing to do with the virus, but you do report that. The CDC has one that's more detailed called the vaccine safety data link, VSDL, and that one is more precise. They look at your actual electronic health records, and they look at the data, they look at trends, and so that one is more accurate. It's actually surveillance, and they do controlled studies, so that one is more precise. But for the general public, if you have an issue with the vaccine, you can certainly go on the VAERS website and report it, and people do track it, so we can make sure that there are no trends that we need to start paying attention to.
Right. That was a great example of the toothache, or, if you stub your toe after getting the shingles vaccine, that doesn't mean that the shingles vaccine caused you to stub your toe. And then there are also clinical trials too before a vaccine even comes to the public, right?
And with all sorts of population. And this is also, side note, why it's important for people of color to volunteer for clinical trials, so that we're sure that they are tested among a broad array of folks. We want to make sure that Black folks are tested. We want to make sure pregnant women, children, all the groups are exposed, so that we know exactly how these immunizations affect everybody.
Right, exactly. So, I know as a pediatrician, you reassure parents all the time when it comes to that vaccine schedule for kids. Can you help us understand why they're the number of vaccines that they are for kids, and why they're timed the way they are? Like, what do you tell, if I was a worried parent coming in, what would you tell me?
I know it is a lot. It is a lot. And I am a mom too. And when I looked at the schedule, I was like, gosh, this is a lot. But here's the thing. So some illnesses are just more dangerous to you the younger you are. And so we want to get those early. And so those first 6 to 12 months of life, when your immune system is still immature, that's the most important time to give vaccines, so that your immune response, so that training I mentioned earlier is put in place, so that if you are exposed to the virus later in life, you're already protected. And so that's why the series of vaccines are given in the way that they are, simply to make sure that you are covered as best as possible when you're most vulnerable.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. And, measles is one of those early vaccines, right? I believe it's at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months. Or do I have that wrong? I'm not the pediatrician, so.
Measles is at 12 to 15 months, and then a booster.
Oh, see, there you go. Okay. All right. So it is one of those early ones that happens before the age of 2. And we're seeing a resurgence in measles in communities across the country. What is driving this epidemic? And well, let's stop there. What's driving this epidemic? This popping
Well,
up?
I think you called it earlier. Folks are not getting immunized, and they're not immunizing their children. That's number one. And then we are traveling more. Post-pandemic, everybody's back outside. Everyone wants to get on a plane, get in the car, and all those precautions that we were exercising when we were traveling before, with the masking, the sanitizing, not happening anymore. And so, even just in general, not just when traveling, I just think people are being less mindful of just good hygiene, hand hygiene, that, compared to how they were during the pandemic. No one would touch anything. Now it's just back to, kind of the wild, wild west. But that on top of the failing to vaccinate and the increased travel is just a perfect storm.
Mm-hmm. So how serious is this threat? Do we need to be worried about the measles? I mean, is it just another disease like the cold?
No, measles can kill you. Measles is actually one of the scariest diseases to have in childhood and in adulthood. And I don't think people realize just how harmful it is. 1 in 20 measles cases can go into pneumonia if you're not vaccinated. 1 in 1,000 can have an encephalitis, which is an inflammation of the brain. You can have seizures, you can have coma, you can have death. No. You can have blindness from not getting the vaccine. There is a rarer disorder called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, SSPE, mouthful, deadly, period. You die. But even in the best case scenario, catching the measles, you will most likely have diarrhea and dehydration, and that could prove deadly if it's severe enough. So this is nothing to play with. And the populations most at risk are adults over 20 and kids less than 5. So that's our prime high risk population. So no, this is not anything to joke around with.
So, I mentioned in the recap story, about this travel warning, especially if you're going overseas, make sure you're adequately immunized. How do you know as an adult if you are adequately vaccinated against measles?
Well, there's a couple of ways. The easiest would be if you remember being vaccinated. Check that good old record back in the drawer, because you should have that. If you are born before 1957, though, the assumption is that you have natural immunity, so you don't need to be vaccinated. However, if you are a healthcare provider or any kind of high-risk population, if you are immunocompromised, chemotherapy, etc., you probably need a booster if you haven't had one in a while. Other than that, for emergent types of things, you can just have your antibodies drawn at a lab. So those are the main things. But also, obviously, if you've had measles, but doctor diagnosed measles, not I had a rash and somebody told me I had measles, right. But real measles. That's another way of knowing that you've been exposed.
Right. And I think it's really important to note those risk groups like immunocompromised. If you're a patient who's undergone, chemotherapy, is undergoing chemotherapy, or if you're taking medications like prednisone because you have asthma or sarcoid, you fall into that category, right? So, talk to your doctor about getting a booster. Yeah, sorry,
yes,
what did you say?
No, I was going to say, I don't think people realize that asthma, if you're a severe asthmatic, that makes you immunocompromised. And if you're on steroids, that, you're considered immunocompromised. Because people say, oh, I just have asthma. But that's a serious condition. And it's enough to make you want to, make sure that you cover for the other things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, everybody that you know and you love, that has these things going on, spread the word. Talk to your doctor about a booster. So, we're in a time where misinformation is spreading faster than facts, especially online. And although we have all this overwhelming scientific evidence about vaccines, wiping out polio and smallpox and previously measles and for the most part chickenpox and other stuff, vaccine misinformation is on and popping on the internet. So what is one of the most common myths that you've encountered, and how do you generally respond to it?
I mean, there are so many myths around vaccines, but the one that, I hear every single year is the flu vaccine. I took the flu vaccine and I got the flu. And I'm not taking it again because I got the flu last time. And you've also heard that around COVID as well. But what it is the time it takes to develop your immune response. You may have some mild symptoms because you are injecting a weakened form of the virus or a killed form of the virus into your system. So you may have some symptoms, but you are certainly not going to be as sick as you would be had you actually had the illness itself. But that flu one, every year around flu time, I hear the same story of, my uncle took the flu shot and he got the flu. So, I think that's one of the big ones.
Yeah. And I think, one of the most persistent and damaging myths is the supposed link between vaccines and autism. I know people who have not given their children childhood vaccines, because they believe this story and this script about vaccines and autism. So, where did this idea originate, and what has science concluded about it?
This is really one of the most troubling myths out there because it is just so patently false, and it lasted for way too long. So this was a study in 1988 from a scientist in the UK on 12 children. And 12 children, he decided that they were all developmentally delayed, and somehow he connected their delays to the MMR vaccine. No controls, no the sample size was small. Everything that we know about an appropriate study was not done. But the study was published in a very prestigious journal, and so it took fire, and it lasted for years and years and years. That journal finally retracted the story, but it was in the 2000s by the time they retracted it, and the damage had already been done. It was later discovered that the person who wrote the journal article was actually developing his own anti-measles vaccine, so there was some financial gain to be had. So it's really quite messy. But the long story short of it, he actually ended up losing his medical license because of his, willful misrepresentation of this information. Because literally, people have died, to your earlier point, because to get the vaccine because of this single publication. Since then, we've had countless studies. There's a study in 2019, 650,000 children that showed no. So you're talking about 12 children versus more than 500,000. I think the evidence is there. But once you put something like that out into the universe, social media, it's really hard to pull it back because it just explodes.
Right, and everyone, it's easier, and some people want to believe conspiracy theory over the truth and the thing that's right in front of their face. So, unfortunately, that has taken on a life of its own, and it almost seems like the more that you give evidence that it's not true, the more people want to believe, to cling to that piece of information that's false, right? So that sort of leads into the next question, is like, how as medical professionals can we really rebuild trust? Because that's really what it comes down to. I think the reason that people want to believe conspiracy theories is because the trust in science and public health has been eroded intentionally at times. So what can we do? What as a public health official with your fantastic resume, what do you suggest?
So COVID did a lot of damage to the reputation of public health across the nation, because you were there, you saw some of the craziness that was going on. I think that when it's all said and done, one of the biggest decisions you make for your family is who you choose to take care of you. Particularly for pediatricians, because that person has your child's life in their hands for the next 18 years. And so you have to be thoughtful about the person that you select. Are they willing to listen to you? I think that part of the issue in terms of mistrust is time. These visits, and I'm even speaking for myself, these doctor visits I go to are so rushed. You don't really have time to really sit down and create rapport with your doctor, because you've got to get out. My current doctor is amazing, but that's the exception, not the rule. And so you want to find the doc that has time for you, and particularly as a parent, because you want to have the time to ask the questions that you need to ask and not be dismissed. If you have concerns about vaccinations, well, let's sit down and talk about it. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you can hear more than you listen. Hear more than you speak. So that's the point. Let's find out what it is that you're worried about, and don't just be like, well, I'm the doctor, and so I'm the expert. No, like, this has to be collaborative, especially when you're taking care of my child. And so I think open communication is super helpful for improving trust. It's easier, I think, with pediatricians because we see your child so often. Adults physician once a year unless they're ill, but for your baby, I'm seeing you several, 5, 6 times a month, a year at least. So by the time your child is 4 or 5, we're almost family. So it should be easier to trust. But if you don't feel like you can have that type of communication, you might need to find another doc, because you looking online is not going to give you the information that you need.
Right. Dr. Google is not always going to work for you, and actually may give you the wrong information. I have a whole chapter in my book, Excuse Me, Doctor, about interviewing your doctor. It's, like going on a date. You're not going to just fall in with the first person, right? There's specific questions and ways to evaluate your doctor, several of which you just mentioned, that's crucial. And, rather than throw the baby out with the bathwater, no pun intended, basically give up on the medical profession because you have a doctor that, isn't vibing with you, or you don't have a good rapport, continue to find one, because there will be one out there that can work with you. And that you develop a good rapport with. So what are the strategies that you've seen prove most effective in building trust with either individuals or communities when it comes to doubting vaccines?
Usually if you're doubting vaccines, you're probably doubting some other things as well in terms of healthcare. And so I think that the easiest step is just be responsive. When a patient reaches out to you, respond back to them in a timely fashion so that they know that what their concerns are important to you. Because what happens is, if you're that doc that takes 3 or 4 days to respond, they're just going to stop coming to you. And so, you want to be and then they're going to go to Dr. Google. So, you want to be responsive when they reach out to you, even if it's not you, because I don't mind if my doc doesn't call me back directly. I just want to hear from someone, and to somebody in the office to know I was concerned about something, because maybe it's not a doctor question necessarily, but make sure that your staff understand that, it's important for them to be responsive, and make sure that you have good staff in general. A lot of, bad blood happens long before the patient gets in the doctor's office, because you've got a testy intake staff or a testy medical assistant. By the time the doc gets in there, everybody's already, agitated. And so make sure your team is as focused and dedicated as you are, and they understand the mission and why they're there.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I know in the pandemic, it was also too, countering the myths didn't necessarily just happen in the doctor's office. It was also to partnering with trusted people in the community, right? Like faith-based organizations, pastors, labor unions, artists, who could spread the message in a way that was more understandable, and because they were trusted, then what they said was trusted. So it also extends to even beyond the doctor's office, as well. But I think all those things are kind of work together, right? So the other thing with, back to that vaccine schedule for children, a lot of parents delay or space out vaccines out of fear, right? Thinking that it's safer. What does the evidence actually say about the spacing of giving vaccines in childhood?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there's built-in flexibility. There's built-in flexibility to the vaccine schedule. It's not like on the first, because I used to have patients bring their child in on the birthday, and I'm like, you really want to give the baby shots on his first birthday? It says 12 to 15 months. So there is a range. And so if you are one of those parents that is really just uncomfortable with giving, multiple vaccines, you can say, well, let's do the MMR today, and maybe I'll come back and get, the other required vaccines. So there is a range. It's not locked in stone, but you can't delay it too long because you need to get your boosters, and the farther you back things up, the more behind you get. So you don't want to, make it too far out. But there's certainly, 28 days, 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the vaccine. You can wait in between doses and still be safe, because the real goal, again, let me work with you so that your baby's protected, and maybe we don't give the shots all at once. Maybe we give them spaced out so that you're more comfortable. But my primary goal is to make sure the child is covered.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I know in adulthood, for example, there's some vaccines that have more than one dose. For example, I think the big one now is shingles. A lot of
Yes.
people turning 50 and over now thinking about that. And, they might go in for the first one and then forget like for a year, and then go back for the second one. And they're told, look, you have to start it all over
Okay.
again. So, there's flexibility, but I think it's really important to try to stick with the schedules as much, as what makes sense to make sure that it's still working.
Right.
So I can't believe it is time to actually start taking questions from the audience. We're going to bring back Wayne and Lila, who are going to tell us what's going on in the chat, whether there are any questions, concerns, experiences that people are out there sharing. So what are y'all seeing?
Go ahead, Lie. Oh, hold on. This is on me. So our intern,
That
in the
intern,
middle,
man.
the intern
The intern might not get their bonus this week. I don't know.
the intern will. There you go.
Am I on? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
I was saying there's a lot of talk about the shingles vaccine.
Yeah.
Not really a question about it. I actually put in the chat my experience. That vaccine took me down, but it's light work compared to the virus. So might
Yeah.
have it.
Shingles doesn't care.
It doesn't. And I can say, as an emergency physician, when I was seeing patients, people come in and it is super painful, and that pain can last for a while, and it can be disfiguring, especially if you get shingles around your eye. It can cause complications with your vision. So yeah, like you said, it's light. It doesn't feel good, but it's light work compared to actually getting shingles.
Right,
for real.
compared to that. So
Yeah.
go get your vaccine. So I do have a question. So for parents who are on the fence or feeling anxious about vaccines, what questions should they be asking their pediatricians?
So when we give vaccinations, there's always a consent form that you sign.
Okay.
And people just sign it. They just sign it blindly without really reading it or even asking about it. And I think that it's important for you to understand what the side effects are, because that's part of where the panic comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I give you the measles vaccine and your child has a fever, that might be a normal thing, or he's
Right.
she's a little cranky. But if you don't know, you might think that that's an adverse reaction. So understanding what to expect after the vaccine is really important. Like, this kid may be a little sleepy, but if he's too sleepy, you need to pay attention to that as well. So, I mean, just knowing when to be concerned, what to watch out for, what kinds of things you can expect. And they vary by vaccine, but usually it's, you just got an injection, so you're going to be cranky. It hurts. You're tender. You may have a fever. Some kids even get a little bit of diarrhea, but if you know that ahead of time, you're less likely to be panicked about it.
Really, really good point. Yeah, really good point.
Yeah.
So with the autism myth having been debunked, why do you think it still continues to influence vaccine hesitancy among some parents?
Because the truth of the matter is, cases of autism are growing. They are growing. We just don't know why. There's probably a lot of factors that are contributing to it. We live in a pretty toxic environment. We have microplastics, People are living near, all sorts of different hazards that we may not even be aware of. Also, there's a huge genetic component. So the more people that are born with autism, the more people that will have autism if they reproduce. So, there's a lot of factors that are contributing to it. But, the measles thing is definitely not the issue.
Right. Yeah, I want to just piggyback on that. Because it's growing and we don't have a definitive answer to say this over here is what's causing it, then people are grasping at straws. And especially, if they see people in their community, other kids that have autism, they want to make sure that that doesn't happen to their kids. So they're going to take whatever grain of way to feel empowered that they might be, making sure that their kid doesn't develop autism. And that's something that they feel is preventable, right? Oh, I can just not vaccinate my child. Whereas the things that Dr. Ford is talking about, all these other possible things seem less controllable, right? And so I think people want to gravitate to the thing that makes sense that they might be able to control, which unfortunately doesn't work.
Wow.
Right.
We have a question from Deborah Jones. Are there any vaccines that are considered more important or urgent than others?
Well, it depends on how old you are. For children, I think that the MMR is critical. I think that, what we're seeing right now is an end result of people not getting this important vaccine. For older adults, I think that shingles, you're absolutely right. That shingles vaccine is very important. The pneumococcal vaccine, because pneumonia and seems to be deadly. I'm still a big fan of the COVID vaccine for certain populations because I think people's memories are too short. We lost a million people from this disease. So I think that you still need to be thinking about that, particularly if you're in certain risk groups. So a lot of it depends on your age and where you are in life and what you're exposed to. But definitely that MMR, I think, we're not seeing polio as often, but we still saw cases of polio in the last few years, and I thought we were done with that as well. So, we need to be thinking about polio, MMR, but I don't think there's any unimportant vaccine. But if I had to prioritize, I would say that those were the top ones.
Can I sort of broken down
on
by demographic or age group?
Second?
I said sort of broken down by where you are and your demographic, your age group, etc. Yeah.
Sure.
I'm sorry,
I
Dr.
wanted to specifically just throw in there and ask you about HPV for teens and meningococcus for teens going off to college. Where would you rank them in that spectrum as well?
Thank you for that. Yes, that is a definite critical one. I have seen some really unfortunate cases of folks with in college with meningococcal disease. One who lost a leg. So this is very serious. And meningococcal is highly contagious. So you and looks like the flu when it starts. And so yes, that would definitely be one before you go off to college. HPV, obviously for different reasons, but still, we don't want to have a lot of folks running around with cancer either. But definitely meningococcal, because that one is so fast. When you hit it, it hits so quickly, and so to have the vaccine on board would be critical. In real life.
For people who don't know, that's meningitis. When you hear about those cases of people with overwhelming brain infections, meningitis, and the cancer is cervical cancer.
HPV.
From HPV. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, thank you for that. Back to the audience. I kind of hijacked the questions.
Well, no, but Dr. MEL, in that vein, what are some of the symptoms, just on the sidebar, and we're going to come back to the audience, but what are some of the symptoms of meningitis?
Dr. Ford, you want to take that one?
Again, it starts like the flu. So the overall just kind of feeling, I just feel bad. You may have fever. Ultimately, you will start to get disoriented. You can have vomiting and diarrhea. a lot of times people say that folks with meningitis are just kind of loopy. They're disoriented. They don't know where they are. They may even start hallucinating or talking crazy. But by the time you get to that point, you're actually very, very, very sick. So if somebody starts to decline like that, they need to be immediately taken to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And they might also complain of a headache and stiff neck.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
or
what I was
the
trying to
light
get to.
bothering their eyes. Yeah. But
Light sensitivity.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually to piggyback on that, a friend of mine actually had several strokes after having meningitis during that
wow.
whole section, and just wow. One day you think you had the flu, the next day, you're fighting for your life, which is
exactly.
So it's important. It's important. We have another question from Bridget. Bridget Jones. That sounds like she might have a diary or something. I'm sorry, Bridget. I'm sorry.
You have to read it with a British accent, but go ahead.
Oh, I can't. Now that you said that, I can't. How do we handle vaccines access in low income or underserved communities where people may not have easy access to healthcare?
Excellent question, Bridget. Yeah.
It's a great question. There's lots of programs for children specifically. There is a free vaccine program, VFC, Vaccines for Children, for low-income children, no cost, and you should be eligible for that if your child is eligible. There are also different funds that support vaccinations for folks who are above that line of income where they may not be eligible for that particular program. So there's lots of ways. We really try to not prohibit anybody from getting a vaccine because it's that important. So there's lots of different public health. If you go to the public health department, and they will probably cover you for anything you need. That's their job.
And I also like to put in a commercial for federally qualified health centers, or what people might know as free clinics. Excellent place to get health care, and they see you on a sliding scale. So, based on what you can pay, and, as part of your care, vaccines would be a part of that, as well as just your overall comprehensive general health care checkups, etc. So always think about the health department and quote unquote free clinics, community clinics.
And I see Lila put up a link in her chat.
Awesome.
Okay.
And we're going to share that link on Dr. MEL. We'll get
Fantastic.
the intern to put it up.
All right, intern. All right. What else? Do we have any other questions? I think Lila, we lost Lila momentarily.
We lost Lila momentarily, so I'm one-on-one. I'm on my own. So we have another question. And this question, I gotta say, I had the same question when we were talking about having this show. With all the conflicting information out there, how can we tell if a vaccine is truly safe? I mean, how do we know? The layperson, the regular layperson. Okay. Looks like we lost Dr. Ford.
We got streams from LA, and
we got streams
LA
from LA.
Is back. Atlanta's out.
We had the power glitched.
Oh, the power glitch. Thanos.
Wow. Wow.
Thanos decided to wipe out half the power in LA.
Well, I can try to take that question until Dr. Ford comes back. I would say, first ask your healthcare professional, ask your doctor, have a conversation with them. If you're truly concerned about the safety profile of the vaccine, let them, that's what you pay them for. That's what they are being paid for, to look at all the scientific evidence and explain to you what is safe and effective, and what is, more importantly, safe and effective for you. In terms of, if you have allergies, if this particular vaccine might have eggs in it, and you have an egg allergy, for example. So talk to your healthcare professional. That's, I would say, the best advice. I think if Dr. Ford mentioned those sites like the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. A lot of people were going there during the pandemic and looking at little isolated things that people reported. But again, you cannot make conclusions about whether the vaccine is what caused it. If I just happen to stub my toe after getting the COVID vaccine, it doesn't mean that the COVID vaccine caused me to stub my toe or have a toothache. So, making conclusions from those quote unquote doing your research, quote unquote, online, looking at the vaccine adverse reporting event reporting system, you're not necessarily going to come to the conclusions that your healthcare provider can help you come up with about whether it is safe and effective for you.
Lie, what you got?
Let's see.
I can get another one.
Okay.
So, let's see. Let's put Dr. Ford back in there. Dr. Ford, location.
There she is. Okay.
My power went out.
Wow, that's crazy. So did Lila's for a
I'm on my
moment.
balcony right now.
Oh, wow. I heard that there's solar flares expected, or there were solar flares. I don't know. I can't think of what would affect something in LA and in Atlanta all at the same time. Yeah.
I could have a conspiracy theory, but I'll keep it to myself.
Me too.
This is the show for it, right? So you were about to ask a question, right, Wayne?
Why do some vaccines need booster shots? And how do we know when they're necessary?
So a booster just increases the response. Some immunizations just are you couldn't get the first dose to be strong enough. It would be too strong for you. So they give you enough to build your response. And then it's like a reminder that, we need to boost this up a little bit as you age. I mean, the age range is, for example, the MMR, you start from 12 to 15 months, and then from 4 to 6, you get a booster. So you are reminding your body that, hey, we still need to protect ourselves against this virus. So that's really what the booster does, is just remind your body to continue the immune response. All vaccines don't need that because it depends on what age of life you're in. But that's why, for example, we get the flu shot every year, because we need to have a new one all the time. The same for pneumonia. You get a pneumonia vaccine annually because it has to be given based on what the current virus is on that's out in the environment, if that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. So you meant the flu. The reason why we have to get the flu vaccine every year, and also COVID too, is because those viruses change very rapidly. So even though the vaccine for last year had the certain strain that was circulating, a new strain will be circulating next year, so they update the virus. Whereas things that don't change very rapidly, like measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, right? Yeah, you only need one booster, and that you get it in your childhood, and it lasts you your entire life, right? So yeah.
And Dr. MEL, at the top of the show, did I hear you say there is now, Dr. MEL and Dr. Ford, there is now a vaccine for chickenpox?
The varicella vaccine is a chickenpox vaccine that's been around for over 25 years.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I had chickenpox way over 25 years ago.
Yeah,
right.
I didn't realize.
And I had chickenpox at 21.
Oh yeah.
When I started seeing patients, I had never had it as a kid. Miraculously, somehow I evaded it and I had it. But now, you don't have to get it because there's a vaccine for that. And actually, I'm assuming that we're going to be anticipating that this group of infants moving forward who've gotten the chickenpox vaccine are going to have lower rates of shingles,
yeah.
because they now are not getting that I don't know if people know that the vaccine that causes the virus that causes chickenpox is the one that sleeps in your body for years and then comes back out when your immune system starts to get weaker at, age 55, 60, 65, etc. And that is what causes the shingles. So for the people in the last 25 years who've been getting the vaccine as a child, they're not going to necessarily even need a shingles vaccine, perhaps.
Bless
So,
you.
The other thing that's really important to mention about vaccines is when you vaccinate, it's not just about you. You're also protecting people around you.
Absolutely.
So even though you may be healthy, maybe, grandma or auntie has cancer or is a diabetic or is a bad asthmatic. And so you want to protect other folks because if they get that virus, it could be a lot more deadly for them. So it's not just about your personal protection. It's about for the people around you as well.
Right. Exactly. That so-called herd immunity, right? Yeah. I don't know. Can you explain that concept of herd immunity for us?
Herd immunity is that when you get, for example, with COVID, that's why we're seeing less COVID right now, is because more people were immunized. And so when they're not passing it on to other people. So you sort of protect the herd by having a few people that are already protected so they can't pass it on. I hope that makes sense. It's just, it's a matter of protecting a larger group by just a significant number of individuals being immunized that are in that same community or group.
Right. So that virus, if it comes, the only way a virus can live is inside somebody, right? So if you already have immunity, when that virus comes up against you, it can't live in you so that you pass it on. And so therefore, if you have a great number of people like that, you're then protecting the one or two people who aren't vaccinated or can't form an immune response because there's nobody to pass it to them because those people have already been vaccinated. So yeah, that makes all that unfortunately is probably right. Well, you know what? It is that time, y'all. This has been amazing. Thank you for hanging in there with us, Dr. Ford, through power blackouts and all kinds of stuff. You have been just a fountain of information. We really appreciate you. Thank you, Lila Mays. Same thing for coming back after the blackout, the glitch. And of course, Wayne Bruce. Thank you, Be Health Empowered family. You're amazing. Remember, be wise, be well, and be health empowered. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.